Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavad-gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. Chapter 2, text 13. I think some of you know this verse, can chant with us, or after me. Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumarang yauvanang jara tatha dehantara praptir dhiras tatra namuhyati. Translation. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body, from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Purport. Since every living entity is an individual soul, each is changing his body every moment, manifesting sometimes as a child, sometimes as a youth, and sometimes as an old man. Yet the same spirit soul is there and does not undergo any change. This individual soul finally changes the body at death and transmigrates to another body, and since it is sure to have another body in the next birth, either material or spiritual, there was no cause for lamentation by Arjuna on account of death, neither for Bhishma nor for Drona, for whom he was so much concerned. Rather, he should rejoice for their changing bodies from old to new ones, thereby rejuvenating their energy. Such changes of body account for varieties of enjoyment or suffering, according to one's work in life. So, Bhishma and Drona, being noble souls, were surely going to have spiritual bodies in the next life, or at least life in heavenly bodies for superior enjoyment of material existence. So in either case there was no cause of lamentation. Any man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of the individual soul, the supersoul and nature, both material and spiritual, is called a dhira, or a most sober man. Such a man is never deluded by the change of bodies. The Mayavadi theory of oneness of the spirit soul cannot be entertained on the ground that the spirit soul cannot be cut into pieces as a fragmental portion. Such cutting into different individual souls would make the Supreme cleavable or changeable against the principle of the Supreme Souls being unchangeable. As confirmed in the Gita, the fragmental portions of the Supreme exist eternally, sanatana, and are called kshara, that is, they have a tendency to fall down into material nature. These fragmental portions are eternally so, and even after liberation the individual soul remains the same, fragmental. But once liberated, he lives an eternal life in bliss and knowledge with the personality of Godhead. The theory of reflection can be applied to the Supersoul, who is present in each and every individual body and is known as the Paramatma. He is different from the individual living entity. When the sky is reflected in water, the reflections represent both the sun and the moon and the stars also. The stars can be compared to the living entities and the sun or the moon to the Supreme Lord. The individual fragmental spirit soul is represented by Arjuna, and the Supreme Soul is the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. They are not on the same level, as it will be apparent in the beginning of the 4th chapter. If Arjuna is on the same level with Krishna, and Krishna is not superior to Arjuna, then their relationship of instructor and instructed becomes meaningless. If both of them are deluded and the illusory energy Maya, if both of them are deluded by the illusory energy Maya, then there is no need of one being the instructor and the other the instructed. Such instruction would be useless because in the clutches of Maya, no one can be an authoritative instructor. Under the circumstances, it is admitted that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord, superior in position to the living entity Arjuna, who is a forgotten soul deluded by Maya. Bhagavad-gita literally means the song of God. When God speaks, He sings. It's known as the basic instruction in spiritual knowledge, but spiritual knowledge being the highest knowledge, the basic instruction is also very high. Just like basic instruction in atomic physics is over the, unless we have any atomic physicists here, it's probably over the heads of most of us, right? So basic instruction in spiritual knowledge is also a higher level than that of the normal discourse that we get in human society. This is this series of instructions, which I've taken a verse from today, is the most basic or introductory knowledge, the very point that we are changing bodies, which is known in English as reincarnation. But as Krishna points out here, changing bodies is going on at every moment. Actually, Krishna says that we're going through phases of life, but in the explanation, Srila Prabhupada points out that we're changing bodies at every moment. The body that we have now, 1, 2, 3, in the 1, 2, 3, the body is changed. Everything's always changing. That's the nature of this material world. Jagat, the material world is called Jagat. Yogachati iti Jagat. That which is always literally going, it's expending. That is called Jagat. It's always changing. So, the example is given here. It's easy to understand. Although it's essential spiritual knowledge, but it's not difficult to understand by giving this example. That, where's your kid? We need him as an exhibit for this example. Okay, so now you can imagine how old is he? 1.5? 2.5. All right, so you see, as parents, the changing body principle, right? In the first few years, it's quick changing. Actually, the parents don't see it so much. But if you come back every 2-3 months, you can see what happened. They change so quickly. So, newborn baby is changing body very quickly. The baby becomes a child, a baby is also a child, but an infant. Yeah, a baby is also an infant. Anyway, a 3-month-old becomes a 3-year-old, and there's a lot of difference, right, between a 2.5-month-old and 2.5-year-old. And there's a lot of difference. Practically every year is a lot of difference. And then in the first years, the formative years as they're called. So the body is changing rapidly. And the mental state is also changing rapidly. If a 20-year-old has the mentality of a 5-year-old, that's called mentally retarded. Nowadays they have some other term probably. They're always trying to find some less pejorative terms. What do they call it now?
Mentally challenged.
Mentally challenged, is it? Yeah. I saw something They don't say short people now, they call them vertically challenged. I saw it really. Vertically challenged. Who's challenging them? Mentally challenged, who's challenging them? Anyway, it's called, in the days of less politically correct speech, it was called mentally retarded. So anyway, the change is always going on. At every second, the body is changing. We don't see it directly, but we can understand the cells in the body, even with every breath, the incoming and outcoming breath, there are different reactions going on. So the body is always changing, and the mind is always changing. And the change, it seems very hopeful in the beginning. Grow up, have your life ahead of you, everything looks hopeful. Actually, I think nowadays, even the young people, nothing's hopeful. It's hopeless from the very beginning. And then, young, healthy, can play sports, and this and that. And then, from about the age of 25 or so, you start to notice that the signs of aging are there. And it goes on and on and on until one fine day, you're dead. But you're not dead. That's what Krishna is pointing out here. That the body is never actually alive in the first place. The body, which is always changing, is matter, but that which gives life, or is life, is the spirit, the soul. And the body only appears to be alive because of the presence of the soul. It only grows because of the presence of the soul. If a baby is stillborn, doesn't grow. You can give electric shocks or whatever you like, but the body won't grow because the soul is not present. So the soul is the principle of life. The body is different from the soul. The body is a temporary cage for the soul. The body is always changing, but the soul stays the same. The person stays. The soul is the person. Just like the body is always changing. According to medical science, so we're told, pretty much every cell in the body changes every 7 years or so. So, if we think that the body is me, then 7 years ago I should have been a different person. But when a friend or your mother sees you after 7 years, they recognize it's the same person, and they say, well, I remember when you were 2.5 years old. But how is it? What happened? Now you're 2.5 decades old, 25 years old. So if we were actually just a conglomeration of chemicals, then what is it that your mother recognizes from the 2.5-year-old to the 25-year-old? The body has completely changed. The mentality has completely changed. The mentality of a 2.5-year, except in the case of a mentally challenged person, the mentality has completely changed. The perception of the world, perception of one's role within the world. A 2.5-year-old doesn't have... What are the ambitions of a 2.5-year-old? Tell me, Gopalacharya. Just to get some food? They don't have much ambition, is it? At that age. There's no real... Everything's provided for them, so they don't have much ambition. Desire, definitely. But splayed out. Whatever they see, they want to grab. Is it? Like that. Exploring. Beginning to explore the world all around. So it's a completely different mentality. The mind which is changing at every moment. But there's a general mindset of a person, the personality. But that changes also. Generally, it's expected or hoped that as people grow older, they become more calm and wise. I don't know if it's always true, but it's generally expected like that. That when the body's young with a lot of energy, then the mentality also tends to be more hot. And as you get older and the body slows down, then the mind tends to slow down. And it's supposed to get wise by experience. But I don't know. If people spend their whole life foolishly, then you just become an old fool, isn't it? If you spend your life watching the TV, then you become a bigger idiot. Idiot box means you become a bigger idiot as you grow older. So anyway, the mind changes, the body changes, but the person stays the same. So who is the person? Is the person the body? No, the person is not the body, because the body is always changing. How can you identify the person? Well, we do that. We identify the person with the body, but just to give a gruesome example, if we were to chop little bits off the body, you'd still be the same person as long as the life can be sustained in the body, right? So if I chop off the finger, I don't become less of a person. It's not a recommended experiment. This is just a theoretical one here. Don't go out and say, well, in the Hare Krishna Center, they told, then I'll end up in jail or something. Crazy cult. We're not recommending it. It's just theoretical here. And the mentality, now that's more subtle, so it's more difficult to understand how the mind is not exactly the person, because the mind can also change. The mind is always changing, but the person remains the same. And so here Krishna says that when death occurs, it's death of the body, but the person remains, because the person was never the body in the first place. And a sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Considering that we've been through this many, many times, birth, growth, running around in the world, jumping up and down, eating something, passing it out the next day, and then dying. We've been through this many, many times. A sober person means a person who considers all these points. He doesn't become bewildered. He doesn't become overwhelmed by that. Whereas people who do not have spiritual knowledge, they become overwhelmed by death and the prospect of death. But a sober person knows that we've been through many, many births and many, many deaths. So a sober person, considering these points, a sober person, that's the word translated here, dhira, means someone who's not just running around in this world trying to get something to eat, something to drink, something to enjoy. But a sober person means one who thinks more deeply, sees more deeply. So this is to whom Bhagavad-gita is spoken. Krishna speaks Bhagavad-gita to Arjuna. to bring Arjuna to a deeper platform of understanding. Don't be concerned simply with what we see on the surface. What we see on the surface. Or on the surface, what is that seeing? That means the interaction of the senses with the sense objects. We see objects. We hear sound. We also feel various objects. So we feel the cold. We feel the wind today. So we smell various smells. We taste various tastes. So these are the interactions of the senses with the objects of the senses. And for most people, that is life. What is called pleasure or happiness in this world is mostly based on the interaction of the senses with the sense objects. But if we consider that everything in this world is temporary, and I'm not this body anyway, then the interaction of the senses with the sense objects, it's not that important. That is considered to be pleasure. Or pain. It can be pain also. In fact, if you consider the pleasure that we can get from the sense of touch, that's sexual pleasure mostly, well, that is a level of pleasure. But the amount of pain we can get from the body is a lot more than we can get than the pleasure. There are all kinds of little parts of your body that you really can't get much pleasure from. You can get a lot of pain from. Who's heard of it? Who knows what a scaphoid is? No, I learned when I fractured it. It's a little bone somewhere in there. The doctor, he knew exactly where to, tiny little bone. Knew immediately where to touch. Now, no one ever got any pleasure out of a scaphoid. But I can assure you, you can get a lot of pain out of it. I don't recommend experimenting, but if you're unfortunate enough, you may find out what a scaphoid is. It's some little bone in there, and if you don't keep this thing on for like 2 months, then it'll form a false joint, and then you can't hold anything for more than 2-3 minutes. So you can't get a lot of pleasure out of it, but you can get a lot of pain. Okay, what about toothache, to make a more common example? Everyone's had toothache, right? Anyone not had toothache? So it's pretty nasty, isn't it? I mean, now you've forgotten. No one was thinking of toothache till I just brought up this miserable topic. But what is that? It's just a little thing, but you can get so much pain. You can't even sleep at night. What about ingrowing toenails? Anyone had that? You had that? How much pleasure can you get from your toenail? You can suddenly get a lot of pain out of it. So, on this sounds like a very pessimistic subject, but actually, these are facts. This is a discussion in Bhagavad-gita. These are facts that we should consider. That in this world, although we're always looking for pleasure, and we tend to measure pleasure by that of interaction of the senses with the sense objects, especially in the modern age, but it's actually a cause of, there's distress. And this, Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita, okay, who knows the verse? Interaction of the senses with the sense objects is a cause of distress, beginning, middle, and end. Anyone? No? Okay. Yehi sangsparshaja bhoga dukha yonaya evate adyantavanta kontaya nateshu ramate buddha. The interaction of the senses with the sense objects for the purpose of pleasure, it actually causes suffering. Beginning, middle, and end, it actually causes suffering. Now here in this verse which we read today, we have dhiras tatra na muhyati. A sober person is not bewildered by the changing of body and by ultimate death. Now in the other verse which I just quoted, we have buddhaha, an intelligent person. An intelligent person does not try to take pleasure in that which causes suffering. That makes sense, doesn't it? It makes sense, but then who's sensible? Everyone's trying to get pleasure from that which is sure to cause suffering, which is the material body. So, Krishna is giving this spiritual knowledge. Spiritual knowledge is not vague, it's very clear that the body is always changing, but the soul is different from the body. The last change of the body is called death, but the soul never dies. Before this body existed, whichever body you may be in, you existed. After the body dies, you will continue to exist. Now, if we think about this, that's what we're trying to do, think of it. Krishna is speaking to us to get us to think about it. It's not just, this Bhagavad-gita is not a book it's quite a big book, but it's not meant for going around and bashing people on the head with and saying, believe it or you'll burn in hell forever. Luckily we escaped on May the 21st. You know about that? Judgment Day? So, Krishna in Bhagavad-gita doesn't say, listen, believe in me or I'll burn you in hell forever. He says, listen to me. Try and understand. Use your intelligence to understand what is our actual position. So, if we consider this, that we are eternal living beings, well, that's going to affect our whole outlook on everything, isn't it? I mean, if we think that we're just here for a short time, if we think, I said, if we think that, and then after that you could say anything. But if you just take the first few words, if we think, who thinks? No one's thinking, just living. How many people think? Well, actually what happens at death, what happens before birth? Who's thinking? And especially in the modern age, that what was I saying? That idiot box, the TV, and now I'm from the old generation. Now it's internet. Who cares about the TV? It's all one nowadays, right? So, and there's just the senses are bombarded from birth with all kind of stimuli, which just even though we might consider ourselves somewhat intellectual, it actually makes us stupid because we don't even think about the really important things, which is, who am I? What am I doing here anyway? I'm not going to be here long, obviously. I mean, if you live 70 years, it's not very long. What happens after that? What's the purpose of it all anyway? So, if we actually think, we should try to get answers to these questions, right? Otherwise, simply living, eating, sleeping, producing various byproducts in the form of children and urine and what's a polite word for that thing that comes out your backside? Anyway, we all know what it is. Or if it doesn't come out, then you're in trouble. And if it does come out, you're in trouble also. Either way, you're in trouble. So, anyway, apart from the discussion of the various pros and cons of passing and not passing, we're all in trouble in this world if we think that's the problem. We don't think, we just drift through life. Or we do think, and we think, what about the problems in Ireland? And what about the problems in Syria? And what about that? That's considered thinking. But what about the problems everywhere, all the time, that we're all suffering? I mean, even if, which is not possible, the United Nations actually wanted peace in the world and were actually able to establish it, then so what? Still you have to grow old and die. And what's the meaning of, even if you're able to feed everyone in the world and Monsanto went bankrupt and life in the world became wonderful in all ways, still we have to get old and die. So what about that? That's what we should actually be thinking about. What is the actual meaning and purpose of life? This is discussed here by Krishna, as I said at the beginning. This is the beginning. This is the beginning knowledge in the introductory book of Introduction to Spiritual Knowledge, the first topic to be understood. And then people ask us, well, do you believe in reincarnation? As if it's just a belief. If you believe in the Bible, you believe in the blood of Jesus, whatever that means. I always thought it sounded horrible. Bathe in the blood of Jesus. Believe. There's this whole thing that religion is a matter of belief. But here in Bhagavad-gita, we don't find that. Krishna speaks in a very, in a manner that anyone can understand if they are dhira, if they're a little bit sober. That the body is always changing, the mind is always changing, the person stays the same, which suggests that when the body ceases, when the present body that we're in ceases to exist, when the present mind that is connected with this body also stops functioning, that we shall continue to exist. So what are the implications of that? The implications are that we shouldn't be, first of all, we shouldn't be interested only in this little life that we have, this tiny, this blip in time. That's the first thing. And then the next thing is to consider the nature of this world, that it is full of suffering. I mean, we can say that, well, actually it's nice, the summer's coming, well, you never know what kind of summer it's going to be. I mean, you never really get a summer in Ireland, but with the weather, the way things are, do you get summers in Ireland now? I don't know, because the whole weather situation all over the world is so messed up. You actually get summers nowadays? The temperature goes above 70 Fahrenheit. You still use Fahrenheit over here? Huh?
We get about 10 days. Probably.
10 days of, yeah. I mean, the sun actually shines. You can see the sun and the sky is blue.
10, maybe 12 days.
10 or 12 days, yeah. Okay. So, Ryanair still has cheap flights to Mallorca. Can anyone still afford them? I guess they must be, otherwise they wouldn't be flying them. So, despite all these things, life in the material world is miserable. If we consider in a sober manner, there is suffering. We struggle in this world to be happy through the senses, which doesn't bring happiness. And then, for all this struggle, the body, which we think is me, just rots all around us. We're living in a rotting cage, rotten meat. That which we think is me is gradually rotting meat. But the good news is that we are not the body. We do have eternal existence. The desire to be happy that is natural for everyone is not just a fantasy or a hopeless imagination, but it is a positive fact that everyone can realize, and that is the subject of Bhagavad-gita. First of all, to understand who we are, what is the situation of this material world, and how we can come to the position that everyone desires, which is simply to be happy, that's all. And happy, what kind of happiness should we desire? Well, if you can say you have a wish which can be fulfilled, then any wish, genie in the bottle, jumps out and says, okay, I'll fulfill any desire. Well, why desire only €1,000,000? Why not 70 billion trillion euros? Just as an example, because if you have that many euros, there wouldn't be any value left to it anyway, because there aren't that many euros in the world. So the government would just print up a bunch and then it wouldn't have any value. Might keep the printers busy for some time. What are you going to pay them in? So, why just try to, if you can think, well, what will make me happy? I have a nice house in the countryside, and the summer will be at least 1 month. And what else? What else do you want? Unlimited supply of Guinness? Sophisticated people don't drink Guinness, do they? They drink coffee. Is it? I don't know. So what makes you happy? What will make you happy? What will actually make us happy? Our desire is to be happy, unlimitedly happy, with no interruption. Some people try for that by taking drugs, right? And you get a boost, but then it's all over. It lasts for a short time, and even that isn't happiness. That's just some sensation. And then after it's over, then depression. But real happiness means a state of complete bliss which lasts eternally. This is pointed to in Bhagavad-gita. That we are meant for eternal, blissful life. We are not meant to be in this situation of suffering, and that we can attain to that life. There are certain things we have to understand. Certain things we have to understand which mostly people don't want to understand. They don't want to understand because there's some egoism there. Eternal blissful life is possible when we accept that not only we are eternal beings, but we're also tiny beings. And our constitutional position is to be subordinate. Oh, people don't like that at all. Don't like that. We are constitutionally subordinate to the supreme controller. Don't like. Most people don't like. So they say, yeah, I'm eternal, I'm spiritual, but I'm actually one with God. There's this idea that we're one with God, but we're not one with God. God means the supreme. We are not the supreme. It's not a difficult point to understand intellectually, but people don't like it, this idea. You mean I'm not God? This idea that I am very important. To give this up is very difficult. But if we just accept what should be actually an obvious fact, but we can't see it because of even though we're very, very tiny, we have an immense false ego by which we think that I am supposed to enjoy this world. Obviously I'm the most important person in the world. We can see that. There may be in the news paper, as they used to be. Now it's the news on the internet. 200 people killed in a plane crash in so and so, such and such a place. And as for me, I've got an ingrowing fingernail, and that's much more cause of concern to me than 200 people killed in a plane crash. What do I care for the 200 people? I got a pain in my finger. We take ourselves to be most important. We're more concerned. What can I eat today? Let me get something nice to eat. And then 200 people. Okay, well, let's flip through. Watch the sports news. So this seeing ourselves as the center of everything, instead of seeing that I'm not. I am subordinate. There's a supreme controller I'm subordinate to. If we can just accept that, then we can come to our constitutional, our natural position, which is to be happy. And the really good news for everyone raised in a culture whereby people can announce that May the 21st is Judgment Day, and a lot of people believe him, that almost everyone's going to get thrown into hell by God who loves you. For the good news for people raised in this ghastly culture whereby they have the idea that God, if you don't join the right church, you get thrown in hell forever. The good news is that actually God really does love everyone, and He's sweet and beautiful and kind and loving, and our eternal relationship is with Him. And so being subordinate to Him doesn't mean that you just have to kiss His shoes, to put it in a polite way. There are other parts of the body which that example is sometimes given with. But we can, or actually we do have naturally an intimate, loving, blissful relationship with Him. That's what love means. Love of Krishna, who is sometimes misidentified with God. Actually, He's God, but the idea of God in the Western world somehow at some point, some 2,000 years ago, a little less than that, got badly screwed up. But actually God is actually not only the most powerful person, but the nicest person. So our relationship is with Him, Krishna, and it's blissful and loving, and that's what we have to go to be happy. So the beginning knowledge is that we are not the body. We don't really belong in this material world at all. Our position is in the spiritual world with Krishna. All right, well, that's a call from the material world. We have a call from the spiritual world, and the ringtone is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna is calling us. We have to call Him also. Direct connection. All right, so the basic principle. We're not the body. The body is temporary. We are eternal. We are meant for eternal blissful life, and let's get ready for that. We have to prepare for that. We can transfer ourselves from this miserable situation of repeated birth and death and go to the spiritual world with Krishna. So that's the basic thesis which Krishna describes in Bhagavad-gita. So I'm not going to say more about it right now, although there's lots more to be said. If anyone has any question about this, please ask, and to the best of my ability, I will answer. Yes, please.
I have a question. Actually, what's your belief or what Krishna said about soul connection with the body? When it starts exactly?
Soul's connection with the body?
Like the day of birth or the day of creation, the day of birth?
Yeah. You asked about belief or Krishna's belief, but Right, okay, I'll tell you. But I'm just that word you use, belief, we don't like that word very much because things are as they are, whether we believe them or not. Just like a lot of people believed Judgment Day was May the 21st. But
I don't believe because they don't know for sure. So
they don't know, yeah. But there are certain facts, right? Certain things are facts. So either it's true or it's not true. Either we are living eternal spiritual souls, or we're not. So we should try to understand the facts. Krishna is giving spiritual facts. So the soul enters the soul is in the semen actually, and is transferred and mixed with the ovum, and then the embryo starts to form. So it's from the very beginning. The embryo would not form unless the soul was there. Right? Simply matter by itself doesn't form into complex bodies. When I was a kid at school, some long time ago, actually a very short time in eternity, but let me see, I guess that was about 40 years ago. It's something I actually remember from all those hours and years I spent at school. One of the few things I remember is that we were told that the cell, the basic cell, talking about organic cells here, biology class, it's very simple, and very soon scientists will be able to reproduce them. That so-called knowledge which they were teaching was probably out of date at the time they were teaching it, but it takes them time to update their curriculum. So nowadays the understanding is that even the most simple cell is far more complex than any computer or modern city or anything like that, and this whole intelligent design thing has come up because scientists have gone deeper and deeper into studying the microbiology, and found that it's so complex at the molecular level that it just can't come into being by chance. So the living bodies are far more complex than inorganic matter. So that complexity, that birth and sustenance of living bodies, that only takes place when the soul is present. Otherwise it doesn't take place. Again, that example, if the child is stillborn, that means been growing in the womb for 9 months, but due to the pain at birth, or there's some discrepancy at birth, the child dies, or they may die before they're born, before what they're called born, then the body doesn't grow because the soul is not present. The soul is required for life because it is the soul that has life, not the chemicals. The same chemicals in a body can be outside a body. What are the chemicals? Carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen. It exists in everything in the universe, but only within the body does it appear to be alive. Life means the soul is there. If the soul is not there, there's no growth. Actually, in Sanskrit, which is the language of Bhagavad-gita and of the Vedas, and which is that's the basis of what is nowadays called Hinduism, and actually Buddhism also, which was, and Jainism and all these things. So there are actually different words. What is called birth, where the child comes from the body of the mother, that is called bhumishta, which means to come to the earth. or to come to the world. And there's another term called garbhishta, which means to be situated in the womb. And these are both considered stages of birth. Actually, the actual birth begins with the impregnation of the mother by the father. That's actually the birth, according to Sanskrit understanding. That's why in not nowadays, but up until recently in India, what in the West would be considered the 10th birthday would be considered the 11th birthday in India, because the first birthday is the day you're born. You've already been there. It's not the day you're born according to the modern understanding, but actually the birth takes place when the soul, which is within the semen, that seminal particle mixes with the ovum, and then the embryo starts to form. And interestingly, there's a whole description of that in the ancient Vedic literature, of how on the first night, how it starts to grow, and all after 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, what is the development, which is only recently, according to modern science, they've only recently so-called discovered this, but the complete description is already there in the Vedic literature. So, birth is from the very beginning. Which is why abortion is sinful. You're killing a child. They arbitrarily they say, what do they say in this country? That it's after 2 months, 3 months, what is it? You're not allowed to do abortion.
Now they say if the mother's life was at risk. So recently they had a case where a mother said she was suicidal because she didn't want the baby. So it didn't matter how long the baby was there, they just agreed with abortion.
No, but they say that, isn't it that they say that there's something 3 months, 4 months? Yeah. I see. So it's like, not in this country, yeah. But the idea that the embryo is gradually developing, and then from one day it's just matter, and the next day it's a baby. One day it's just removal of organic waste, and the next day it's murder. This is not very scientific, is it? It just means they don't know, that's all. They don't actually know what life is. They cannot define, they don't know what life is. They want to define it in terms of matter, but it doesn't work. There's a good example how trying to define life in terms of matter doesn't work. Life is a different principle from matter altogether. So that's sinful because, especially human life, that is meant for God realization, and to deprive someone of that is very sinful. Any unnecessary killing is sinful. Even now, in the Western world, it's like strongly imprinted on the consciousness, the Holocaust of Nazi Germany, but it's going on every day. Millions of animals and chickens and fish are killed every day. It's a Holocaust going, abortions, killing. It's a killing culture. The animals, they suffer. They don't say, oh, you want to kill me, you want to make a hamburger out of me? Oh, here I am. They suffer. So that inflicting suffering on other living beings, that's sinful. We don't have any right to do that. So there are reactions for that. Anyway, that's another subject. For lack of knowledge of this, for lack of this spiritual knowledge, people are doing all kinds of wrong things because they think that when the body is finished, everything is finished, and so it doesn't matter. We can do whatever we like, as long as we feel, as long as we don't hurt anyone. They say you can do whatever you like as long as it doesn't hurt anyone. But who is that anyone? And animals are also living beings. But even that idea that we shall do what we like as long as it doesn't hurt, and that's also a flawed idea, because human life has responsibility. We're not supposed to be just living here for the sake of enjoying our senses as pigs do. We have a higher responsibility. The intelligence of human life is meant for using the opportunity of human life for elevating our consciousness. If we live like pigs, just where is food, where is sex, then we're misusing our human life. That is also sinful. So, as I said, when we understand that the body is temporary, but we are eternal, it completely impacts our whole life. It has tremendous implications for our whole existence. Everything we do, our whole perspective on life. What are we doing here? Yeah, anything else? Heavy talk, isn't it? But life is heavy. We just dream it away with some cartoons or some Harry Potter or some rugby match or hoping for the summer. But reality is deep and profound. So the good news is that however much we've wasted our time and done things which we shouldn't have done, which we've all done, that can all be rectified immediately by taking shelter of Krishna. That's Krishna's mercy. By chanting his names. Should we chant for a few minutes?